Hi, I'm Jennifer Lee, Admin Evangelist, and this is How I Solve This. Ever need to easily compare group values or row versus summary level data in a report? Well, we have formulas here for the win. Skye shows us how you can flex your formula superpowers in your reporting. Today, I have with me a returning guest presenter, Skye Tyler, Senior Consultant at Exponent Partners. Hi, Skye. Welcome back to How I Solve This.
Hi, Jennifer. Thanks so much for having me back.
Yay. So for those who didn't see your earlier episode, Skye, can you please share with us a little bit about yourself and your Salesforce journey?
I'd be happy to. I found Salesforce when I was a military spouse and I was looking for a remote career that I could really grow and flourish in, even though we had to move every couple of years. I started working in Salesforce in 2015, and I'm really excited that the entire time I've been working on the platform, I've also been working with nonprofit organizations. That's one of my passions. I'm adamant about supporting nonprofits because I think they play a critical role in our communities. And because of the amazing work that they do, they really deserve access to the best technology to help them meet that mission.
Great. What type of advice do you have for new admins coming on and learning Salesforce and getting involved?
I love working with folks who are just getting started on this journey. I remember when I started and it was exciting, but also a little scary and kind of daunting. So I guess the first piece of advice I'd give is to connect to the community. There's an amazing wealth of information that's available. I wish I had known earlier in my career just how willing the people in the community are to help. So whether it's your local Trailblazer community groups or virtual community groups or Salesforce Saturdays or a specific organization that's geared towards something that you identify with, whether it's like Pep Up Tech or Salesforce Military, find that community that you feel comfortable going to, asking questions. They're going to support you. They're going to encourage you. And then before you know it, the tables are going to turn and you're going to be the person who's supporting and encouraging others. So definitely connecting to the community is sort of the first tip that I would give. And I think the next one would just be have fun with it. It's going to be scary. It's going to be hard. There's going to be times when you get really frustrated and you want to throw something across the room. Embrace that. Know that it's going to happen. But just have fun with it. Do the trailheads, learn the new things, try something out in a sandbox or a developer org, break things in a sandbox or developer org. And then just figure out what you're passionate about. If you're going to be doing a job for 8+ hours a day, 40 hours a week, it's a lot more enjoyable if you care about the thing that you're doing. So I would also recommend that you take some time to figure out what it is that inspires you or drives you so that not only are you doing something that's impactful and meaningful for a company or an organization, but also for yourself.
That's great advice. The Salesforce Ohana is like no other. When I joined the ecosystem in 2011 and I didn't know anything really about Salesforce, it's just overwhelming being able to get help from people who you don't even know, right? They're just like open arms. I will help and support you and lift you up. Like that's just no other group out there that's like that. And that's what makes Salesforce Ohana so unique.
Absolutely. And I think just to tie into that a little bit more on like new admin advice, with the way that the ecosystem is all connected, people know people, and then building your network on LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever platform. One of the things I really encourage folks when I'm mentoring them on their job search is to connect with someone at a company before you interview there. Because during the interview process, it's effectively a sales process. They're selling you a job, you're selling yourself as an employee. So there's some limitations to the the truthfulness that gets exposed during an interview process. But if you can connect through your network to someone who works there or someone who recently worked there and ask them what it's really like. What's a day in the life of an admin here like? What kind of support do I get? What kind of, how do they manage people? What are the expectations? And really leveraging those connections in the community to know, is this going to be a good fit for me?
Mm-hmm. Great advice.
Yeah. And to your point, people are so willing to help. So if you're not connected to someone, there's a chance that you know someone who knows someone
Exactly.
and can make that introduction for you.
Exactly. All right. So let's get down to business. Share with us the business problem that you're trying to solve.
Yeah. Well, if you watched my previous appearance here, we were talking about a childcare program called Campfire. And the program team was really excited about how easy it is to create camping groups, to register kids, to track attendance in Salesforce. They'd been using spreadsheets before, and it was just clunky and time consuming. Mm-hmm. So now that they're in Salesforce, and they have easy access to the data and they're able to put good data into the system, the Campfire planning team wants to be able to start using that data from Salesforce to better understand the camper attendance trends. They want to make sure that they're maximizing their efforts and that they're providing the best service to their campers. For the planning team, it used to take a lot of time and manual work to manipulate the spreadsheets of attendance to be able to do things like compare attendance between this year and last year, or attendance between month to month. They also wanted to be able to see things like what percentage of an attendance for a month was that attendance the total of the year. And so it was a lot of just regular maintenance in these reports to be able to get to that data. And now that they're in Salesforce, they want to be able to just run those reports and get that information at their fingertips.
All right. So, this won't be an admin episode without actually seeing how you got to the nitty gritty in Salesforce. So why don't you show us how you solved this?
I'm happy to. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to use the previous Group Val function to be able to get down to that comparison of the attendance between this year and last year and month over month. So I've already started with just a base report that's looking at camper attendance. And we're going to go ahead and just go into the edit function of the report. Now, as both of these functions names imply, previous group value and parent group value, they're going to be working with reports that are grouped. So really quickly, handy little tip for Salesforce reporting and grouping by dates. If the object that you're working on has just a single date field. So in the case of our attendance, there's a date field that the users enter information into. What is the date that this attendance was tracked? To be able to do grouped reports by multiple levels or matrix, you need a second date field that has the same value in it. So for this demo, I've actually created a separate date field that we just called date 2. And this is actually just a formula field. And the formula field for date 2 references whatever value was entered by the user in the date field. And the way that this is so fantastic is it's going to let you, again, parse information out. So actually, I put these a little bit backwards from the way that I want to write my formula. So let me do date 2 first. All right, but then the same thing, we're just going to put date in the second one. Now we have 2 groupings. First, a group by row and then a group by column. And you can see based on the little arrows here, how those 2 different fields are grouped. And then we're going to change what they're grouped by, because without changing what they're grouped by, it's just going to break everything out into the individual value. And so we're going to do the drop down and we're going to change the group date by. And for the first one, we're going to group it by calendar year. So the first bunching is going to be calendar year. And in this example organization, we have data for 2020 and 2021. But now with the power of matrix reports, we're going to group the column by the calendar month in year. And if you hover over it, if it cuts off the last bit of it, you can see. So we've got calendar, month, and year. And now, instead of seeing each of those individual dates of all of the different entries, we now have a grouping first by year and then by month within that year. So this was all of the 2020 months, and this is all of the 2021 months. So that's the first step of setting up your grouped matrix report to be able to use the previous group value function. Now that we've got that set up, we're going to hop down into the columns. Now, I have already added in a few columns in this base report, the capacity for each of the camper sessions, the number of campers that actually attended, and then a formula calculation for the attendance percent based on how much space there was, how full was that class. We're going to use the drop down next to columns, and we're now going to add a summary formula. And we click that, this fun little editor comes up. And in this case, we're going to just give it a simple name of difference by month. And we're going to leave the output type as number, but I'm going to change the decimal points to 0 because it's counting whole number of attendees. We don't have half people show up, so we're just going to leave that as a 0 decimal. And then the formula editor here is where we're going to ultimately put in the function. So the fields here first let you pick fields from within your report. And then the functions, you can also, of course, type into it, and it'll start to show the different values that are available. It also gives you a handy little helper of like how the formula works. So that's really useful. But I also always love to reference Salesforce's documentation. And so in the developer documentation, there's some cheat sheets for parent Group Val and previous Group Val. And so it gives you some really helpful information as well as some sample examples of how to use these different functions. I would encourage you always do Google whatever it is you're looking for plus Salesforce, and I could guarantee you there's going to be some great documentation either directly from Salesforce or, as we mentioned, from some of those phenomenal people in the community who just like to help. For now, I'm going to actually just grab a formula that I've already written out. We'll just walk through it real quick. Well, we're going to walk through it whenever it pastes in correctly. All right, so what we're looking at here is we're taking first the sum of the number of campers, and then we're going to subtract from that the sum of the number of campers from the previous group value. So we're going to try to find that difference from the current group from the previous group. You do always want to make sure to just double check the display and what groups you want to summarize by. So in this case, we're going to group by what we had selected already in the row and the column groupings and click apply. If you happen to miss that little display step of picking the groupings and just click apply, it's going to throw an error for you. So don't panic. Just go back, make sure you've got the right display settings. Now that we've entered our function of the previous group val, you'll see that this difference by month field is now showing as a summary, and it's showing the difference of what it changes from one month to the next. Now, if there is no previous group value, it will show a null value. So for this particular January one, there was no previous January of 2019 for it to compare to. But it will show, for instance, here in January, there was 116 attendees. February, it dropped down to 52. So that difference between there is 64. And if you just run your report, you'll be able to see it in all of the data instead of just the short summary of data that appears in the editor.
Cool.
One thing to keep in mind is that you'll see here the November and December data is all blank. So this might be actually a little bit deceiving if your leadership team or your reporting team is looking at this to show a big drop of 95 attendees. And that's just because we haven't entered any data yet for November or December. So just keeping that in mind, that it's always going to be a little bit skewed up into the point that you've entered the data. Historical values will calculate, but there are no future values to calculate. Great. So that's using the previous group value function to be able to compare year over year, month over month. But one of the other reporting challenges that the campfire planning team wanted to be able to get their brains around was for each month of the year, what percentage of that attendance for the month did it contribute to their total attendance? So they want to be able to see some trends to be able to say, do we need to increase the number of sessions or campfires that are available during certain months? So we're going to now hop in and create a new report that is going to be using the parent group val. So again, I just have a base report compiled together using the attendance object. And again, I'm just tracking the capacity of the class, the total number of the campers, and that attendance value. So we're going to hop into the editor function again. And just like previously, we're going to be working with those date fields. But first, I do want to highlight that I am filtering this by just last year's data. And the reason for that is when you're using the parent group val, and in this case, our parent grouping level is going to be by year to get that total attendance for the year. If I tried figuring out attendance percentage by month in a year that's currently happening, the data is going to be constantly changing and be somewhat skewed, right? So if you're comparing in June, you don't have July, August, September, October, November data yet. So for this report, we're going to just be looking at last year's attendance data. Now we're going to group again by the date and date to fields, but this time we are going to group them both at the row level. So instead of adding one to the column, we're going to group them both at the row level. But we're going to do the same thing. We're going to group first by calendar year so that we can get that annual total information. And then we're going to group it by calendar month in year so that we can get those subtotals. Now, for this point, I don't need to know about each and every one of these rows. So I'm going to actually go down here and just hide the detail row. So we're looking at just the monthly data. Mm-hmm. It's just a little bit easier, and most likely your planning team doesn't need to see each and every attendance entry. Now that we've got our parent group value or our date grouping, we can do the same thing, but with the parent group val instead of previous group val. So now we're going to add the summary formula, very similar to what we did in the previous example. Except this time we'll call the row the percent of annual attendance. And as that name implies, we're going to change the output value to percent instead of a number and the decimal points to 0. So again, in the functions, you can start to type in to search for the function that you're looking for. And when you select it, it'll give you the brief description of it. Again, feel free to refer back to any other documentation that helps you. But for now, we're going to go ahead and paste in an example of the formula. Now, similar to last time, we're still using the number of campers, the sum of that field. But this time, instead of subtracting the previous group value to find the difference, we're going to divide it by the parent group value to find the percentage of that. And don't forget to set the display. And in this case, we're going to do the display by the second date grouping. So we grouped first by date 2, and this time we'll group the specific group by just the date field. And click apply. Once you've entered in that summary formula column, you'll see it appear here. And if you run your report, again, it's going to show you that whole data set. And you can now see, for example, in 2020, that the January attendance made up only 9% of the total attendance for the year, as opposed to March made up 10%. So this kind of data can help the planning team, again, decide, do they need to have additional resources, or are they needing to shift some of the dates and sessions around? And just as a reminder, again, filtering it by just last year's data, because if we were looking at this year's as well, November and December would be blank. And so the percentages of the total amount would continue to change every time you add in data for additional months. And so that is how I solved the campfire team's need to be able to really dig in and parse out some of that data that they've been entering into Salesforce.
Well, I loved how you use Group Val and parent Group Val formulas to solve your business problem and comparing values from one group versus the previous group, and really be able to report on those and not have something like really complex. So thank you, Skye, so much for being a returning guest on How I Solve This. And I hope to see you again in the future.
I will be happy to come back and see you anytime, Jennifer. Thank you so much.
You just saw Skye show us how to use simple formulas to do some cool data comparisons in your reports. You can always find videos like this at admin.salesforce.com, and also by subscribing to our YouTube channel, Salesforce Admins, so you never miss another episode of How I Solve This. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Awesome admin.